Hello and welcome. My name is Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UAP, UFO news from everywhere and anywhere. Today, I'd like to relate a story I saw on Street of Silence. It takes place in Tasmania and involves a very reliable reverend and his wife who witnessed a massive mothership accompanied by smaller UFO craft. So on October the 4th, 1960, Reverend Lionel Browning and his wife were in their dining room when they spotted a cigar-shaped craft out the window. The object was a good distance away, around 400 feet, in the air just above some hills. The weather that day was overcast, and when the two first spotted the craft, it was somewhat hidden as it was coming out of a rain squall. Reverend Browning described the craft as having a dark gray color with several black bands going around the circumference of the ship. The craft had some sort of antenna-like device on one end of the ship as well. And it's important here to point out that this seems to be an unusual feature on a UFO. You don't get many UFO reports where witnesses see an antenna like this. So the Reverend and his wife were able to make several estimates on the sighting based on their experience watching commercial airlines fly by in the area. Reverend Browning estimated the craft went about 60 miles per hour. The object moved about 1.5 miles based on the landmarks it flew over, and after traveling for a mile and a half, the craft then came to a sudden stop. Then suddenly 5 or 6 smaller crafts came flying down from the sky above. They flew behind the craft and then positioned themselves around half a mile from the mothership. Then the mothership began backtracking and heading the way it just came. The smaller crafts followed and soon disappeared into the thick rain squall. The Reverend and his wife had watched the UFOs for around 2 minutes. On October the 9th, Reverend Browning told his story to the local newspaper, and they would publish the story the next day. The paper told the story, and an artist drew a recreation of the sighting. In time, several other witnesses would report seeing the same thing. And one interesting thing about the sightings is just hours after it occurred, there were multiple reports of a massive explosion. No one saw anything or could account for what it was. The next few weeks, there were reports of sounds in the sky. Reverend Browning reported that he heard the loud noises on several occasions and believed they were connected to the UFOs. The Royal Australian Air Force investigated the case and believed it was caused by the moon's reflection on the cloud. This explanation, of course, didn't make any sense. The sun was still setting at the time of the sighting and would have overpowered the moon. There's a few interesting things that stand out in this case. One is the noises in the sky. This phenomenon is known as skyquakes, and it still happens today. Skyquakes are noises from the sky with no apparent source. There are multiple theories as far as what causes them, but science has not answered the question yet. The noises could be related to the UFO or might not be. Many people believe there is some sort of connection. So even though that was Tasmania's most famous UFO case, there were still those that doubted and thought that the mothership was no more than a lenticular cloud or a punch-through cloud, but that wouldn't account for the accompanying smaller craft that the Reverend and his wife reported that accompanied the mothership. I think this was a pretty credible case, not only because of the Reverend reporting it, but also because of the accompanying multiple witnesses that confirmed his story. Now I'd like to move on and talk about a story that I saw on Weird World. It's one of Brazil's more incredible UFO cases ever documented. So the story begins in 1970 at 11:38 on a Sunday morning, just southwest of Rio de Janeiro. The Mercado family was enjoying their weekend. Their house sits above sea level, providing an excellent vantage point of the ocean. Donna Maria Nasaru Mercado was in the kitchen preparing lunch while the rest of her family entertained themselves with a party game on the veranda. They were joined by their neighbor, Paulo Agua, an official of the Brazilian Federal Police, who lived nearby. It was about 2 minutes after Donna had asked for the time that Jal happened to glance over at the sea. What he saw made him quickly catch the attention of the others. The entire group abandoned their game and began discussing what they were witnessing. The object appeared to be a grayish metallic craft, looking as though it might have been between 4 to 6 milliliters in length. It was covered with a transparent cupola or dome-like structure. Inside, they could see what appeared to be two persons who seemed to be signaling with their arms. Shaw was positive about what he saw. They were two persons in the craft, wearing shiny clothing and something on their heads. These figures seemed to be quite small. They appeared to be working on the deck of the craft. The witnesses debated whether the occupants might need assistance. The craft had come down on the sea at the dividing line between the darker inshore water and the clearer water of the open ocean, a distance initially reported as about 500 meters from shore. They decided that Joshua should run to the nearby hotel located about a kilometer distance away and alert authorities. While he was gone, the rest of the party continued to watch the object closely. During Algria's absence, what lasted between 25 to 35 minutes at most, the disk moved about 100 meters nearer to the shore at one point. Throughout this time, no sound was heard from it, and it did not display any characteristic bobbing movement that would be expected from a boat on the water. When John returned from making his phone call to the harbor police, whose headquarters were near the Calabucha airport in central Rio de Janeiro, this was still on the sea. Based on the timing, the craft remained on the water for approximately 40 minutes. The takeoff was particularly striking. According to Agua, when the disk took off, it did not rise straight up. Instead, it skimmed along for about 300 meters on the surface of the sea, throwing out a bow wave similar to those created by a fast motorboat. It was only when the object had become airborne and was moving away in a low arc out to sea towards the southeast that the witnesses realized this was no ordinary boat. Donna proved to be an especially observant witness. As the disk took off, she noticed that on its underside it had a hexagonal-shaped object, which she compared to the Brazilian fruit known as a carbola. This object appeared to be retracted up into the craft and had a number of colored lights flashing in a consistent sequence: green, pale yellow, and red. This appearance changed once it was airborne. While it had looked like an aluminum when resting on the sea, once in flight, it appeared transparent. At this point, Donna could clearly see the two occupants sitting inside the craft. Despite the relatively quiet conditions, there was little traffic along the avenue at that hour. None of the witnesses heard any sound from the disk. Once airborne, it was speedily out of sight. But the incident was far from over. On the area of the sea where the craft had rested, there appeared what Donna described as a white, hoop-shaped object of the size of a trunk or chest. After a short while, this hoop sank beneath the surface, then reappeared. From it, there separated off a yellow oval-shaped object. The diameter across its widest point was approximately 40 centimeters, and it floated with about 20 centimeters projecting above the water. After remaining stationary for about 3 minutes, this oval yellow object began to move slowly towards the beach. At the further end of the object was a greenish flange or thin flat rim-like extension, which later separated off from the main yellow body and continued to follow it at a distance of about 80 centimeters. After approximately 15 minutes, by Donna's estimation, the yellow object had come to within about 120 meters from the shore. It then performed a right angle turn to the left and headed off towards the beach at Gavija, maintaining roughly the same distance from the rocks off the shore. This westward movement was contrary to the ocean current prevailing in the area at that time. Donna went down to the road in front of her house to better observe the yellow object's movements. Some boys who happened to come along joined her, and she pointed out the object to them. The boys attempted to hit it by throwing stones, but without success. This lasted about 10 minutes or so, after which the object vanished from view around the rocky cliff face some 500 meters from where they were standing. Meanwhile, the white hoop remained visible, though it disappeared temporarily several times. It was steadily approaching the Kavija beach as if it were going to rejoin the yellow object. They watched the white hoop for a total period of about 20 minutes as it kept vanishing and reappearing until it too was finally lost from sight. The family's day had been thoroughly disrupted by then. They had been interrupted in their parlor game just before noon when they first saw the disc. They only returned to finish the game at about 3 p.m. when the sighting was completely over. The lunch was delayed until about 5 p.m. There was an interesting development regarding the phone call Chouette made to the harbor police. The police had checked his telephone number, and he being a federal agent himself, they promised to send help. They assumed it was a mishap offshore of some kind. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken at least an hour for a harbor police patrol boat to reach the area from their headquarters. Zhao was therefore quite surprised when after only about 20 minutes he saw a fast patrol boat heading out towards them. When the patrol boat reached the area, it stopped at a distance of about 1 kilometer from the shore. The witnesses then saw the crew hoist aboard with great difficulty a cylindrical red object. The difficulty appeared to be due to the object's considerable weight. Having retrieved the object, the patrol boat returned at high speed to its point of origin. The timing of the patrol boat suggests that the crew may have seen the UFO take off before reaching the area where it had been resting and where the white hoop remained floating. So I think this was another very credible UFO case, not only because it involved a federal police agent, but also because of all the multiple witnesses that saw this in broad daylight and whose testimonies never wavered. They were all consistent. I hope you guys enjoyed this very credible and well-documented UFO case in Brazilian UFO history. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.